Welcome to the Strong, Single and Human podcast, a real look at single parenting, how to navigate the ups and downs of life with kids on your own while keeping sane. We cover all manner of subjects from domestic violence, dealing with childhood trauma, through to fussy eaters and how to help your kids become resilient. I'm your host, Claire Martin. Welcome. This week's guest, Kirryn Lee, is a Matrescence mentor, energy coach, co-parent to 2 little girls, and a recovering people pleaser. She is on a mission to support other mothers to stop living to please others and to start living for their magnificent selves. Matrescence, which is the process of becoming a mother, throws us into a whirlwind of self-doubt, grief, disconnect, loneliness, and a whole bunch of other toughness no one tells us about. Tell me about it. It's a journey for anyone to go on, father or mother. This transition is begging mothers to pay attention, and Kirryn believes this time is a spiritual awakening for all. Through her podcast, Matrescence Awakening, group programs and one-to-one mentoring, Kirryn is supporting mamas to demystify the spiritual world and become their own healers through the bigness of this transition. As someone who used to hold judgmental opinions on spirituality and also used to hold herself high on the mothering pedestal well before she'd actually humaned children, Kirryn knows firsthand the power of leaning into the unknown, releasing perfectionism and surrendering to the messiness of it all. This is the Strong, Single and Human podcast. Hi, Kirryn Lee. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you for coming and spending time with us. So, look, I've given an intro as to who you are as such. So, look, I only briefly touched on, like, you were co-parenting of 2 kids, etc., etc. So, look, tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got to where you've got to.
Well, I mean, it's a big journey. So I guess I'll just give a quick overview, and we can kind of go from there. But essentially, I grew up as a really good girl, I would say, very much a rule follower.
We're all good girls.
I mean, not everybody. I wish I had been more rebellious, but I just didn't have it in me. I very much wanted to, please the adults in my life and do what I was supposed to do, be that good, nurturing, caring girl. And kind of went through life following that pre-written path that I thought that I wanted, which was, go to school and then go to study at uni and do a little bit of traveling and fall in love and have kids and get the dog and get the house and happily ever after.
I have to say, though, you're not a bad crim or anything like that now. Like, you're a good person still now, right? It's like,
I am.
It's not that
I
you've
am
like
still
turned over the leaf and gone down the devil route.
No, I guess I just question a lot more now. And I don't feel like I need to necessarily conform to the things that I feel like I'm supposed to conform to as a woman. So I guess we'll kind of get to that. But it took a really big journey, and it's a journey that I'm still really on in understanding myself and who I am and what excites me and inspires me and lights me up and how I want to show up in the world. And really taking control of that narrative for myself now, as opposed to being like, well, these are the rules that I'm supposed to follow, and this is the path that is written for me and that I should be, in. And I used to think that what I had and what I was creating was good enough and that it should be enough, until I kind of went through realizing that the life that I was in wasn't necessarily where I wanted to be. And with that come a lot of unpacking of, well, why not? What do you want instead? And it's a big journey, really trying to understand that for myself and then having the courage to actually go out and do it. And that, that courage is something that I had to build over time, and I'm still building as
Mm.
I do things really differently to everyone else in my family and within my friendship circles. It's not easy to be, in inverted commas, that black sheep making different choices for yourself, particularly when you have been a person that has followed the status quo for your whole life. Yeah.
And just so just to unpack that a little bit more,
Yeah.
um, your 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 idealized, like, you were living the life, weren't you? I'm trying to put it
Yeah.
into words, right?
Yes.
You were living the life, right? You had perfect, like, well, perfect. Nobody's perfect, right? But you had the ideal partner,
Yep.
husband,
Yep.
you were married, you were happy, or so you
Mhm.
thought.
Mhm.
You'd studied and, done well at school,
Mhm.
like, people
Yep.
people couldn't really go, oh, Kirryn, blimey, crikey, she's had a life, and, like, you just studied hard at school, did really well, moved on, got a
Yeah.
good job, got a good man, like, all of the things, all
Yes.
of the things.
Yeah, I had all
Maybe
the
somebody,
things.
yeah,
We had financial security, so it's not
security.
like we had that hanging over our heads. We had a beautiful house, we were close to family, we had the kids, we had the dog, we had all the things that growing up I felt like I would feel so fulfilled living the life that I had, and I wanted to be a mother. I, just dreamed about being the day when I could be a mum and just be at home and be a homemaker and, be this wholesome, nurturing mum who just loved, looking after the house and looking after the kids and having dinner on the table. That's the life that I thought that I wanted. It was this real Disney princess kind of ending where it's like happily ever after. Once you get the man, it's happily ever after. And I'm sure we're going to touch a lot more on this, but the man that I was married to, my children's father, he is a really, really good
Yeah.
man. And it's not like I really like to kind of highlight that I know I had a good life with him. If there was, no controlling, there was no physical violence. He's such a good person, and I think that has really helped with our situation unfolding as it has. In that, we're very amicable and respectful, but there was no reason that what I had shouldn't have been enough. It's just that it didn't feel right to me. And when I had that realization, it was really challenging because it's like, but he should be enough. On paper, this should be enough. Why isn't this enough? And I thought it was, things that I had to deal with and understand about myself. And that was part of my journey of coming to that realization that the marriage isn't what I wanted and not where I wanted to be with my life. But that took a lot of work and like I mentioned before, a lot of courage to actually go, well, yes, it's good. It's great in some aspects, like we got on so well, but it's just not quite right. And it was really hard to find evidence of people that had separated from a marriage with that story because there's often so much heartache and heartbreak and drama and trauma and aggression and all those sorts of things. And I was like, but that's not me and that's not us. And can we do this?
Well, usually, if you're separating from somebody, and I say usually, you're the unusual, but there may be other examples out there, right? So please let me know. But usually, you're moving away from a domestic violence situation. You're moving away from it might be that somebody's been taken from you, right? So it might be that it was not your choice and therefore it's a bereavement. It's that maybe one or other of you have had an affair in the relationship. So there's not been things quite right. But what I'm hearing from you is quintessentially everything was right. Everything ticked all the boxes. But, like, I wanted to take a step back because you were saying you had this view of what life should have been.
Yeah.
Where did that come from, right? And it's my view as well, right? Like,
Yeah.
when I was growing up in my 20s and stuff like that, my view was I should be, the progressive path was do well at school, get a good job, work hard, get a good man, get a house, get married, I mean, I got stuck at the get married part and then had to get a divorce, and then that was where everything fell apart. But yeah, like that was, and where did you get your view
I think
from?
there's a few things, and this is something that I've been trying to understand about myself, and particularly about my relationship with men or the masculine energy. And it's something that I've really been focusing a little bit more on this year. And so I think there has been a lot to say for the Disney princess
Oh,
narrative.
yeah.
That's what I grew up idealizing. I saw that. I also think that there is a really big part that is generational, to be honest. When I look back at my family history, I think it's in my DNA to have the belief that I have and to have the stories that I have about men saving women. And it's not like there's nothing salacious or anything in my family history, but and it's not something that I particularly want to delve into because it's not my story to tell.
No.
But I really do believe that there are those parts that are in our DNA because my daughter, for example, my oldest daughter, I haven't had Disney princess books in our house since before she was 1. We got stuff for our, baby showers and all that because we're having girls and that's what you do, princess stuff. And when I started reading them as an adult to her, I was like, hell no, like this is not the narrative that's going to be in my home. And so I got rid of it all. But she is still so fixated. It is like it is innate in her that Disney princess, that prince, that saving, that marriage, that is the golden thing that she wants to live. And whether that changes as she grows up, I don't know. But I just look at her and I think, I didn't bring this story into my home. Sure, she receives it from the outside world, school, friends, all those sorts of things. But my narrative in the main home where she lives under my roof is not that a man is going to save you. And yet she's so fixated on that Disney princess kind of role and narrative. And so it's my belief that because I'm holding that in my DNA when I was pregnant with her, that it's been imprinted in her. We know epigenetics that these things are passed down. So think between it, just being in part of my DNA and now it's my job to unpack that and shift that story for myself, but also being reinforced through those narratives in society that, a woman's worth is when she is with a man. That is where she finds her worth in the home and being, loved by a man and nurtured and cared for by a man. Like that is where she's worthy. And that's what I grew up thinking. Like once I have that, that's it. Like life is nailed, life is done. And,
And it's
I
not.
got there and it's not. And I don't want
Yeah.
that anymore. But yeah, it was a
No,
really
it's
big part of my
interesting.
life of, thinking that will be when I feel the most fulfilled.
And it's interesting you say that, right? Because my dynamic is, you said the man comes in and saves the princess, right? Saves them, blah, blah. That's not my dynamic. Very much Disney princess. I very much understand what you're talking about. But it's a Disney princess coming on board and looking after.
The
Caring for.
the nurturing.
And nurturing and all of that stuff. So looking after and making sure that they can go out to conquer and do what these Disney princes do, and me
whatever
to stay
they do apart from being
whatever
hunky.
they do, and me to stay at home and make sure that the home area and everything is all good. And it's a really I've been on my own for like 5 years, right? And I'm happy, thanks very much. And I'm happy with my little dynamic and my son and all of those things. I don't need rescuing. I don't need looking after somebody or anything like that, right? So but it's very hard when you're in that diet. I mean, I'm very much aware of all of that now. So, and I'm sure you are now as well. So, okay. Enough about all of that. Disney princes and princesses all out there. They have a lot to bloody answer for. But, but you had this ideal, lovely, lovely life, right?
Yeah.
So was there something that happened to you that you just then went, oh, hang on a minute, I'm not happy with this. This isn't what I want. Or did it happen gradually over time?
It kind of happened gradually over time. So when I become a mum, I went through this process called Matrescence, which is kind of really in the space that I work and support in now. But it's this transition into motherhood when we start to question everything. And so I
So
started to.
is that what it means? What does matrescence mean?
So
Just in,
matrescence is defined as the process of becoming a mother. So think about it like the transition of adolescence going from childhood to adulthood, where there's this real messy middle of years, right? Where we're trying to figure out who we are, like where is our place in the world, what do we want to do with our life, all those things. We go through another huge shift like that in when we become mothers. And so the world, we try to figure out the world again and what our identity is and how we want to show up and with all of the hormonal changes and physical changes and everything going on, right? It's huge. And so, this I really started to feel it in motherhood. And I knew that I didn't want to go back to my corporate job. I had actually taken a voluntary severance, knowing that I didn't want to go back there, but I didn't know what was to come next. And about 3 months after having my first daughter and kind of realizing like motherhood isn't as fulfilling as I thought that it would be. This my whole life I've been waiting for this moment and yet I still feel like there's something missing.
yeah.
And so I started a business and, started playing around in the business space. I had an e-commerce store. And then I was like, oh, like I love the business, but this still doesn't feel inspiring. I still feel like there's something missing, so I'm constantly seeking for something that's missing. So I started teaching childbirth education, which felt really, really good. It felt like I was giving back. I taught the program that I had used to support myself with my birth, and I had a really beautiful birth. And I felt really kind of inspired to be of service in that way. And so I really wanted to grow my business. So I started working with a business coach. And what I realized about business is that it's such a small part is about the strategy and such a huge part is around the mindset and showing up in business and moving through those fears and those blocks and those resistances to, promoting yourself and all that kind of stuff. And so that really started to open my mind and my world up to personal development, which really was like the opening into starting to tap more into the spiritual side myself. So I used to really like resist anything spiritual or weird or woo woo, as I would have said. And, as people say, it's like trusting the unknown sort of stuff, the unseen. But because I had started kind of delving into this world more, I started being open up to more people, more concepts, more ideas. And I was like, wow, like this feels really exciting for me. And part of that was really starting to trust my intuition more. And I did a course, a program with a coach that I was working with all about mindset. And one of the questions around mindset is what is really blocking you from the mindset of intuition, of what is blocking you from trusting your intuition. And there's usually like a top sort of surface level of like, oh, I don't feel worthy, or um, I have this fear about whatever. But actually, what's underneath that? Because that's what's blocking you. And it was in that moment when I was sitting reflecting on why aren't I listening to my intuition more, that this thought about my marriage come up.
Wow.
And I thought, I don't want to listen to my intuition more because I don't want to listen to it, what it's telling me about my marriage. And I thought, holy shit,
Wow.
like I
That's
did
a
not.
big. That's a
Yeah.
massive thing.
Yeah. I didn't want to think about it. I didn't want to give it airtime. I was like, I know that there's something there about my marriage. I don't know what it is. I don't want to address it. I didn't want to. But now all of a sudden I had this information and I was like, holy shit, what do I do with this? So I didn't know what it was. So I just had a conversation with him at the time and I said, look, something's come up. What I truly hoped that it was is that there was a block within me that was not wanting to receive his level of love. So just some really quick background on us. We were best friends for like 7 years before we started dating. So we had a lot of history together before we started dating. And, everyone always kind of told us that we would get together. He'd asked me out a couple of times and I was always like, no, 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 no. We maintained the friendship and the closeness. And so I knew that he had a really deep love for me. And I was like, maybe I'm just scared of really allowing that in and really allowing myself to open up to that. That's truly what I hoped it was. And so it was about a process of over about a year. I think I started exploring that more. And I was like, what am I blocking? What is coming up? And it wasn't like it was an everyday sort of thing, but I might go to appointments here and there, like kinesiology sort of appointments or, spiritual kind of women's circles or whatever. And yeah, life kind of just went on while I was doing that. And the reason that I told him about it is because I didn't want to go to these appointments and uncover or unpack stuff and not be able to be open and share with him what was coming up.
Yeah.
Because we had done marriage counseling prior to this for some sessions. And he was always really open about sharing about what he spoke about in those sessions. But for me, it felt really private and I didn't really want to talk about it. And he always respected and honored that. But I could always get a bit of a sense that, like, he was always like, oh, but what? But why don't you want to share? And he never pushed or anything like that, but I guess it was just more of like a curiosity around it. And so I didn't want to carry that energy through my exploration of what is going on and why can't I show up in the marriage how I want to show up. So I wanted to be really open about it through that journey. And yeah, it was about a year after that. I there was one day, well, there's probably about a period of about 3 months where for me, I just felt really agitated all the time, just like I'd snap really easily. Just there was just a real undertone of like annoyance and frustration and discomfort. And I didn't know what it was and I didn't really explore it. I just kind of just wanted it
You
to go
just ignored
away.
it. Yeah.
Just ignored it. And you can only ignore things for so long.
Oh, yeah.
And then there was one day I was in the bathroom with my oldest daughter. We'd had another daughter by this stage. Had just turned 1. But with my oldest daughter, who was 3 at the time, and she did something in the bathroom, and I just completely snapped at her, like really viciously. And she pinched me and she spat on me, and she'd never done those things before. And I just broke down in that moment. I just burst into tears, and I just said to him, like, "You need to take the kids to mum and dad's." So luckily, they were just 5 minutes down the road, and he was like, "Oh my god, what is going on?" So he went and took the kids, come back, and I just had to say it. It just felt like it was something that I couldn't hold in any longer. And I knew, like, in that moment, it was the marriage that had to go. And I just said,
Wow.
I need a separation. And so I didn't plan the separation. I didn't wake up that morning thinking that I was going to ask for separation. It kind of caught us all off guard. But yeah, that was kind of the start of the unraveling of the marriage.
Wow. So life changing, really, because it's like,
Like in a moment.
yeah.
Mm.
Wow. And so, but so the separation itself, though, really went quite well, didn't it?
I mean, as well as a separation
Well, I know.
could. It was very amicable. I mean, in that first conversation that we had, he told me that I was brave for doing what I was doing. And like you said, it can sometimes come down to things like infidelity and like things get really nasty. And I truly believe that's because people don't have the courage to leave marriages before
When
it
they
gets to
should.
that point. They
Yeah.
would rather like
Yeah.
self-destruct than actually say, hey, like this is good, but it's not exactly what I want. It's not great. And I need to separate. And I'm really kind of proud of myself for being able to have that conversation before things like self-destructed or imploded, or we just lived a like mundane, boring life. I just felt like there was so much more for both of us out there. And so, because he knew the amount of work that I had been doing on myself in trying to understand myself and what I was feeling and thinking in my own inner world, um, we just fully respected the decision. And like, don't get me wrong, it was really challenging. It was very emotional, but we never yelled, we never got angry, we never like were accusing each other of doing this or doing that. It was just from that very first conversation, it was, yeah, it was just pure respect for each other, knowing that we are going to be in each other's lives forever because we have 2
Just the
children
girls.
and we have 2 choices. We can either get really, angry or frustrated or emotional at each other and destroy that relationship and make the rest of our lives miserable having to deal with each other as co-parents, or we can really foster the relationship that we had and, you know, or the friendship and yeah, the connection that we had, knowing that we're going to be in each other's lives. So it's going to look different, but it can still be beautiful in its own right. And
Yeah.
we're, now just nearly 2.5 years separated. Um, And there does feel like there's friendship there. And like we don't go and hang out and things like that, but we'll do family dinners, like we see each other for birthdays, we, go out for breakfasts and, it might be once every month or once every couple of months. But we have got to a place where it feels like there is friendship, but it wasn't always like that at the start. We needed the space and we needed the time to process. And because, we used to be the people that we relied on, we really had to have that distance from each other and not rely on each other to be able to support us through the separation. And so we,
Well,
we took the
yes.
distance that we needed to. But now it's at a point where we can have more conversation and a lot more laughter and, just checking in on each other and life and those sorts of things.
Because how did you navigate that separation, right? Because you hit the nail on the head, right? It's like, well, like you said, right? Your ex-husband was your best mate for 7 years, right?
Yeah.
And like I've been in relationships like that where we've lived together and, situations, circumstances, me wanting a child, et cetera, have separated and split that relationship up. But at the end of the relationship, we were more like brother and sister than we were like partners. Do you know what I mean? Like actual boyfriend, girlfriend as such. But we relied on each other, right? So the car tire blew out, then you would phone and go, hey, can you come? I've broken down or whatever. Or if you needed help, like, I don't know, changing a light bulb, which is really silly because I can change light bulbs. But if you needed help, like just doing something like that, they were usually the person you would call or the person that would help you. So like, how did you navigate that stuff?
Yeah. So I guess at the start, we obviously had our house. My parents lived 5 minutes down the road. His parents live like an hour and a half south of where we are, an hour and 15 minutes south, like on a farm. And so it wasn't really practical for him to go and stay with his parents because he had to go into the city to work. So I went and moved in with my parents for 6 weeks. And so when I had the girls, I found that
Good
really
I love my mum and dad,
great.
but I'm not sure I could go and live with them.
Yeah, it was so great, and I really recognize that as a really privileged thing to have.
Yeah.
Just because the thought for me, we had a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, and I thought, how the hell am I going to do the nighttime routine by myself? Just that stuff that you don't think about. And I guess in a way, it was really lucky that I just kind of woke up and it just happened the day that it did. Because if I had have thought about all of the things that I would have to learn and navigate and do and organize and figure out, like finances, house, like how am I going to earn money, all that stuff, I probably wouldn't have done it because it was like too overwhelming. But I was just really thrown into the deep end of like, I have to figure this out. And so, I had financial support from my parents in terms of like they would do the grocery shopping and just feed us. And it's not that money was ever an issue. There was never money ever restricted or anything like that. But it's just, I think with so much going on and so much trying to figure out, just knowing that someone's doing the grocery shopping and putting food on our table while I try and like just figure life out was just so, so good. Having help with that nighttime routine and those sorts of things. So he actually didn't end up staying in that house either. He didn't want to. It was too hard for him to be in that family home. So basically our house sat empty for about 6 weeks until, but I wanted it empty for him in case he decided that he wanted to be there because it was easy for work. So I think like the way that we have been able to kind of keep it really amicable and respectful is thinking about each other in those sorts of ways. In how like we can't rely on each other emotionally, but how can I try to make life easier for you in this moment? And so making sure, if he wanted to be in the house, he could be, just those sorts of things, just still having that consciousness of each other and their needs, but without making it top priority. So yeah, I had my family for that first 6 weeks, which I think was like the real pivotal time for me in understanding what was going on. And then just life slowly started to unfold and I just figured stuff out along the way.
Did you have people sitting on the peripherals though that were going, oh, you need to go back into that house because you're going to lose that house? Were there people within your friend zones as such that were saying and trying to influence or trying to sully, for want of a better word, sully your separation, basically, and say you needed to protect yourself because you were splitting?
For me, no, because I was very, very protective of my story and who I shared what with. I didn't go telling anybody. Well, I'm not that I didn't tell anybody.
Yeah,
I
but
really specifically chose who I told and what details I told to who.
okay.
So I really protected my energy because I knew that if I had people coming and doing that and trying to, bring me down or vilify me, that my energy would be going into the wrong places. And the most important thing for me was to make sure that I had the capacity to show up as a mum, and then to make sure that I had the capacity to protect mine and his relationship as we went through this separation, in terms of like making sure that it was amicable and respectful. And so there were some things on the periphery that kind of made its way to me that didn't come directly to me. And I just knew, like, that was the exact reason that I was being really, really protective of
Yeah.
my story. This idea that, if she thinks because I was so overwhelmed and agitated and frustrated in those months leading up to it was comments like, if she thinks she's overwhelmed and frustrated now, wait until she's a single mum. Or, like, how could I have done this? Like, angry at me for doing it. And that made, like, hearing those things come back to me just would momentarily make me feel really angry and frustrated, because I'm like, these people that are saying these things haven't come and spoken to me about what I'm experiencing, or why I did it, or why I made the decision that I made. And when I was able to explain those things to those people, they understood. But I was just so frustrated that there would be this instant snap judgment of my character from people that really knew me. And I would think, you knew my character before we separated, so why now all of a sudden has it changed to me being, this really horrible person that has done something really tragic? Because actually it can be actually really beautiful on the other side. It's just going to take some work to get there. And so like I said, I was very, very protective of what I allowed into my space. And anyone that kind of came close to that sort of narrative was just, I didn't let them in. And that's when I really started to learn the importance of my boundaries and protecting my story and protecting my energy in that sort of way.
Wow, yeah, because I can imagine there would be that influence coming in. There's people have always got an opinion and maybe don't necessarily know the situations and circumstances. Did you, with that narrative then that you were hearing, was there any point where you went, have I done the right thing? Am I being crazy?
Um,
And it's fine if you
I
say
would
no,
say
right? It's okay.
there was
but-
like mostly no. There was one moment, and this wasn't based off what anyone else did. This was just my own inner world. So that happened on a Friday. It was Good Friday. That I had this conversation. So Easter, like, happy Easter. So it happened in the morning.
I always do it around the New
We
Year, so I wouldn't worry.
we we'd planned for some friends to come around. That afternoon, we had some friends, some really, really good friends that they live over east. We live in on the west coast of Australia, so they live over east. They were coming over for the Easter break,
Wow.
and so there was them. So that was a couple and another couple. The six of us are really good, and so we were planning to catch up with them that afternoon. And I broke the news that morning of what was happening, and then so it got to about lunchtime after we'd been speaking for hours. And we're like, well, we better. I was like, do we cancel seeing them? Like, we're not going to be able to see them again because this is the only time they've got. And he was like, well, I mean, what else are we going to be doing? Like, I would like to see them. I'd like them to still come around. So we had friends come around that day. Like, I told them what had happened, and they were there. And
wow.
And then so they left, and then we had the girls, put the girls to bed, and so I hadn't really had any time to myself that day to process anything. And that night we had a little cabin out the back, and he said, all right, well, I'm going to go take my swag and just go sleep out in the cabin or the shed or wherever he was going. And so I was alone in the house that first day basically, and that was the first time that I really just broke down, and I just thought, am I allowed to swear on this podcast?
I just
I
did.
just thought,
Yeah.
what the
fuck?
fuck have I done? What the
Ah.
fuck? Like, I've just completely imploded my life. Like, what have I done? He's an amazing man, and especially with how he had taken me asking for a separation, just highlighted how good a person he was. And I was
And
like,
we have to state he
what
is
the
still an amazing man, all right? We
he
have to
is,
state this,
he is.
right? He is
Yes,
still an amazing man. He's not
he
was
still
or
is.
anything like that.
No,
He still is
no,
an
no, no.
amazing man.
He
The
is.
amazing
Thank
dad
you.
to the girls and
Amazing
everything.
dad. All of that. And I just thought, what the fuck have I done? I've destroyed my life. Like, I need to go. And especially like, because again, he was the person that I'd go to for comfort. So now I'm alone in this house, knowing he's out the back, probably feeling just as like, what the fuck as I
Yeah.
am. And that's when and I was like, what have I done? Like, I need to take all of this back. And I was just real, like, deeply, deeply sobbing. And I had this voice in my head and it shouted so loudly. It just said trust. And it was like, it didn't feel like it came from me. It didn't feel like it was my voice. It was just something just said trust. And it just like instantly stopped me crying in my tracks. And I just took a deep breath. And I thought, okay, I have to trust. I don't know why. Don't know what's to come. I don't know what's on the other side. I don't know what life is going to be like, look like, how I'm
No.
going to navigate this. But I just have to trust. And I'm so glad that I had my spiritual practice, you know, to support me in that moment, because that really did help me in those early weeks to navigate a time where I just had felt like I was free falling. Like there was absolutely nothing supporting me and life was just completely ripped out from under me. But I just was like, okay, one foot in front of the other. Let's do this.
So okay, so I'm gonna get you to try and we're gonna dive deep now. So I'm gonna get you to try and unpack that because right, like you've just made this earth-shattering, life-changing decision, right? That's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Happy life, picket fence, dog, 2 kids,
Yeah.
fantastic guy. That's not what I want. That's not my destiny. However you want to phrase it, right? You blew that up in the air. And then how did you deal with all of the emotions that you had to grieve, right? At the end of the day, you're then grieving that relationship. And they say there's like, 7 emotions that you go through, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm sure, because most women do this, I'm sure you had been grieving those in your grumpy moments up to the explosion day, if for want of a better word, where you'd actually been snapping and, you just didn't feel like there was, because maybe you were dealing with this grieving process at that stage. And women tend to deal with it a lot earlier than men, I have to say. But how did you, what did you tell yourself to get you through those days? Because it's like there could be people listening to this going, well, I ain't happy and I've got what people would think is a perfect life. I've got 2 kids or 5 kids or 1 kid or whatever, but I'm just not happy.
Yeah.
How did you get through after making that, after doing the decision?
Yeah.
How did you deal with it the months to come?
Yeah. So I guess the first thing I just want to mention there, that if anyone is listening that's not happy, my first point of call would not be to go and implode and destroy your marriage. Like maybe there needs to be marriage counseling or something needs to change within the relationship. I don't think that just because someone's unhappy in a marriage that means divorce.
No, that's
but for me,
point.
I knew like there was just a really deep intuitive gut feeling that the marriage wasn't right for me. So I just want to make that really clear that please don't go away from here being like, Kirryn said I'm unhappy, so I'm going to get a divorce. No, don't go and implode. Like take the time that you need to figure it out. In terms of the emotions and my process of grieving, this is just going to sound really boring, but it truly did come down to protecting my space and my boundaries and not letting those people in, and using my spiritual practice. So, for example, I would give myself space to journal and write. I would give myself space for breath work, for meditation, for going and speaking to my parents and allowing those tears to fall. I didn't squash anything down if it wanted to rise up. I gave myself the space to move through it and go through it. And we were still, the girls, Dad and I, were still in constant contact over this time, figuring out the logistics of things, figuring out what was going on, sitting down and having conversations about where our emotions were at. So we didn't completely like shut each other out and cut each other off from that moment. So although we weren't necessarily leaning on each other, we were still having those conversations of like, is there questions that you have about this? Because I'm still trying to understand it within myself as well. And I'm happy to have those conversations about what I'm thinking and feeling right now so that you can help process what we're actually going through. But yeah, the making sure that I had that support from my parents, which gave me the space and time to be able to actually sit with my emotions rather than just constantly ignoring them or thinking I had to do busy work to, so I didn't have to sit and deal with them. I was really, really, like I said, I was really happy that I had my spiritual practice there, making sure that I had the tools to sit in that discomfort, knowing that I had to feel it. There was I wasn't going to get around it. It was either going to come up then or it was going to come up later. And so it would come and go in waves. There'd be times where I would be so sad and at such a loss, and not just for me, but for the life that I thought that I was building for my children. Like I grew up with parents that are still together. His parents are still together. Both sets of our grandparents are still together. Aunts and uncles are still together. Like we are both surrounded by a life where there is this family of unity. And I had to actually come to terms with the fact that I was a person that had taken that away for both of us and for my children. And that was one of those waves that would come. And that would cut like the waves of grief would come and go over the next year and a half. And I would just sit with it as it came up and allow myself to understand what was going on rather than just squashing it down or trying to project it onto him or my girls or, because obviously the ignoring I knew didn't work.
Yeah, but also, right, there's so many times where people go, oh, I'm feeling this emotion. I don't want to feel this emotion. I'm going to have a glass of wine, or I'm going to go out, spend money, or I'm going to smoke marijuana, take drugs, do whatever. And I've probably done all of those, so that's always good. But like I've learned not to now. But it's about not wanting to feel and deal with that emotion and sit within that, right? Which you're just covering it up, right? It's still there. Exactly. It's still festering.
The numbing.
Yeah.
So it's a big part of my life to not numb out. And look, don't get me wrong, I'm not perfect. There's definitely times where I would sit. My vice is like scrolling on social media is the perfect numbing, ignoring, right? We've all got our vices. Yeah. But it's also about being able to have that self-reflection of like, okay, what you're doing right now is really self-destructive. So if you need to have your time doing it, fine, but let's not get stuck there. Like do it and then let's figure out what's going on, because it doesn't bring me joy to sit in that space of numbing. Because I know that when I numb out those hard emotions, the grief, the loneliness, the discomfort, then I'm blocking out me being able to feel those other emotions, the heightened emotions as well. Like we don't just numb out those hard emotions, we numb out all emotions. Yes. So if I want to feel connected to my intuition, if I want to feel really joyous and on purpose and inspired, then I need to allow myself to feel those harder emotions, the grief, the disappointment, the blame, the jealousy, whatever. And so it's part of my path of this is just part of my lesson of these feelings are here to be felt, and you can feel them and learn from them and move through them, or you can just continue to stay numb. I didn't ask for a separation so I could continue to stay numb.
Yeah.
I asked for a separation so I could feel. And that's a very internal process. That was nothing. Like, he never suppressed me in any sort of way. That is very much like Kirryn doesn't know how to deal with her emotions. And so if you want a different life, you have to be the creator of that different life. Wow. He was always my biggest champion in, allowing me to journey and discover myself with all of the work that I was doing. He was my biggest supporter as I started my business and, all of those things. So it's not like he ever tried to make me feel small or like I said, suppress in any sort of way. But that was just my own world that I had to understand and figure out.
Yeah. And so when you said about journaling. You used to journal and write and things.
Yeah.
What did you used to write?
Whatever
'Cause it
was on
always
my
fascinates
mind.
me.
Yeah, whatever was on my mind. So, my journal practice has really evolved over the time. But when I was going through the separation, it would literally just be like whatever was on my mind, I would write it out, and I would just allow that process to unfold and start to just get out on paper what was in my head, like just a big brain dump of what am I feeling? What am I experiencing right now?
So just to get it out of your body, which also
Yeah.
in a way means that you were dealing with those emotions and stuff.
Yeah, definitely working as a tool to help process what was going on because when we keep things in our head, we can just spiral on the same
Oh,
shit time and time and time
yeah.
again. And so, yeah, it just helped me get it out of my head and onto the paper so I didn't have to continue on certain spirals.
And was there anything else that you did that helped you process all of this? Like I know you were saying sitting in the like you meditated, you
Yeah,
wrote
breath
things
work.
down, and breath work. What's breath work?
So, breath work is connecting in with your breath in a way that helps you to uh, process and release trauma. So that like everything that we go through is stored within our body, and breath work is just a way that you can help kind of access that and release it, or get deeper insight into it, into what's going on. So it's just like a somatic way to kind of move energy and trauma in and through and around the body. So it was just a way that I would really connect in, yeah, with my own inner world. And if there were things that wanted to be released, it would release. If there was something that I wasn't sure of that I'd want guidance on, I would kind of connect in with that breath work and do like a really long breath hold, which would kind of open up more of that intuitive guidance, I guess you could say. But there's lots and lots of different types and styles of breath work that you can do. The one that I was doing really regularly is by O2 Awakening, and they have a 5 minute daily breath work that you do. I'm pretty sure they've got it for free that you can access it. So if anyone's kind of interested in that,
Oh,
then
wow.
that's definitely someone that I would, or yeah, a company that I would recommend checking out, and it only takes 5 minutes. So it was really easy to kind of work into my day and just help me to understand my own mind and my own process, I guess.
So did all of this help you in being a better mom? Because I hate to say this, but you voluntarily went into single mumdom,
I
like
did.
head
I guess in
first,
a
right?
way, yes.
Head
Kind of voluntarily,
first.
kind of not voluntarily. I felt
Yeah, I
like I
know.
was
Well, but
trying to do
like,
it, but yes,
yeah,
I did ask. I did
you did
ask for
ask
it.
for this, right? Some of us
I
didn't,
did.
right? But you did ask for it.
Yes.
But like, yeah, did it help your transition into being a single mom?
Oh,
Like, it's a
so
journey.
then,
I know because it's a
yeah,
journey. I'm
my
there. Like,
becoming a single mum was actually very, very confronting for me
mm,
because it made me realize that there was a lot of subconscious beliefs that I held about single mums that
wow.
were really confronting for me to have to reflect on, to think that I held those thoughts and those beliefs. So I started to realize that when I had to start to tell people that I was a single mum, and the resistance that I felt, the discomfort that I felt to
Wow,
actually saying
really?
that I was a single mum, and I was like, what is that about? Because I grew up with this idea that a woman's worthiness is when she's with a man and that she will be saved by a man. And so all of a sudden, I'm a single mum, and I realize that my view of single mums is that they've been discarded. And so I had to
Wow.
understand this story within myself. And, so now I'm kind of had this subconscious view of myself that I'm discarded, as well as the uncomfortable realization that I've subconsciously been projecting that onto other women who are single mums, which, you know, goes so against what I would think would be my belief or my view. And so, that was part of that process as well, of being like, well, now you're here. And now all of these new beliefs are rising to the surface about what you think you are. And so
Well,
that took
because
a lot of work.
you discarded everything you
Yeah.
weren't the one that was discarded, right? So
Yeah.
that turned it completely on its head.
Well, you would think so, but I still held that view because that was what I would think other people would think about me.
Oh, wow.
Because that was
Okay.
my belief. So I would think, well, if I tell Claire that I'm a single mum, she's going to think that I'm discarded. And so I would start this justification process, right? Oh, I'm a single mum, but I asked for the separation. Why does it matter? Why do I have to justify that? And
I
so
know.
it was like
Yeah.
understanding that of like, okay, well, if I'm justifying it, why am I justifying it? What do I think that justifying the fact that I ask for the separation means? Well, it means that I don't want people to think that I have been discarded, that I'm the empowered person here, that
Yeah.
I made the choice. It was my decision. When at the end of the day, it shouldn't really matter. And so, yeah, in terms of like myself and my own journey with being a single parent, that has taken a lot of work for me to be comfortable with. In terms of like my actual children, I like obviously the transition is hard for kids because they
Yeah.
don't have their two parents living under the same house. So that's, taken some things for them to process. Um, but what I do believe it's supported with is me being able to show them that sometimes the hardest decisions that you will ever have to make are the right decisions for you. And that was part of what I kept coming back to, in those first weeks and months after the separation is what am I teaching and showing my girls right now? Because if I can't do hard things that I know are right, how can I encourage them or
Yeah.
show them that they can do those things? So it's kind of like a long term game, I guess, of like trusting yourself and trusting your intuition, even if it's the hardest thing that you're going to have to do. So that was a belief that kind of supported me in those early grieving moments as well. And the other thing that supported me in those early moments, just going back to that while I remember, is that, and it sounds super cliche, but if I knew that I was with him and I couldn't love him in a way that a wife, that I feel like a wife should love a husband or that he deserved to be loved by his wife, then I'm just holding him back from being able to be open to finding someone that can do that. And I
Yeah.
didn't want to do that. I didn't want to have that over my head of like, I am keeping him stuck in this marriage, but I can't give him all of me because that's not fair. And so I kept coming back to that as well, that although I know that, that grieving process is so hard, there will be someone else for him out there. And I truly, truly want that for him. I want for him what I couldn't give him.
Yeah, and I think that's look, I think that's honourable, right? Because at the end of the day, if you truly love the person that's in your life as such, you want them to be happy. And if they're unhappy, and I'm looking at from his point of view as well, is the fact that if you were truly unhappy within the marriage, right, he would want you to be happy. And if that
Yes.
means not being with him, well, yeah, so be it.
Yes.
So be it.
Yes. Exactly. And that's what we want for each other. Like neither of us want to keep the other one stuck. So
Yes.
of course we're going to do what we can to support each other. And we talk about dating and we talk about, finding other people and we talk about like we have had a conversation around love and it's not like we tell each other we love each other all the time or every day or ever really anymore, but we have had a conversation that there is love there for each other. It's just different and that there's so many different
And it can
kinds of
be.
love and like we're okay with that and it's our own unique way of being in relation now, I guess you could say, in our co-parenting. And look, I'm under like no false idea that if we didn't have children in our lives, we wouldn't be in each other's lives. It's not like we would have separated and remained friends. It just wouldn't have happened. But part of me is so grateful that the girls have kept us connected because, you know, I do want him in my life in some capacity. And so I feel really grateful that the girls are connecting us in that way.
Mm, yeah. And how have the girls, the
Yeah.
girls dealt with
Yeah.
dealt with the situation? Because it's been amicable.
Yeah.
There's not been the toxicity that potentially there would be in a relationship split up due to adultery
Yeah.
or due to domestic violence or anything like that. So like, how have they fared? Have they just got
So,
on with it and gone, dad lives there, mum lives
yeah.
there?
Yeah. So for our youngest, so she was 1. So it was a month after her first birthday that we separated. So she hasn't really known anything else. So I think it's felt, I guess, a bit easier for her because it's all she's really known.
Yeah.
For my oldest, so she was 3, so she does have some memories of us being together and living in that house and mummy and daddy being under the same house. I think overall, they've adjusted quite well. There's definitely been times that have been a lot more challenging for the older daughter, where she'll just say, like, "I want mummy and daddy to be together." We tried to do, like a family dinner every now and again in the earlier stages, but we found it too hard because it would be really challenging for her once we,
Yeah.
went our separate
Wow.
ways. So we kind of stopped that, but we're starting to dabble in trying that again and doing that a little bit more regularly now. She's a little bit older. But there will be moments where she'll say, like, "I want mummy and daddy together." And we just, because we are both such a united front on that our family can still be, you know, there can still be love in our family in this really different way. We just always remind her that, they're this is how our life is, and we can spend time together, and we both very much love you, and how cool is it that you get to have 2 houses. And probably about, I don't know, 5 or 6 months ago, I do gratitudes when I have the girls each night over dinner. And so I said, what are you grateful for today? And she
Sorry.
said,
Hang on.
I'm so grateful that I get to have 2 houses. And so, it just, they can adjust and it can be their new normal. And because we're both on the same page with, like, this is, our modern family, I guess you could
Yeah.
say. That's just what we constantly remind her of when she does kind of want to have us in the same house.
So just one final question for you, right?
Mm.
A- And I don't have an issue with any of this. If I was to go into a relationship with another person, man, woman, whatever, right? That I wouldn't have any issues with that person having a close relationship with their ex-partner, right? And that it's an
Mhm.
amicable adult. They go and have dinner with them occasionally, like once a month or what. Like, I wouldn't have an issue with that. But have you introduced anyone into your relationship? That sounds really bad. Sorry, I didn't mean that as a
No, no.
three
Yeah,
sister
yeah. No, no.
three-way sort of situation. But like, have you introduced anyone into the relationship that you have with your ex-husband? Like, whether it be you or him, and have they had issues with the closeness of your family unit? Because it is your family unit, right? And it
It
is
is.
there, and you are close together for your girls, right? It's not that you
Yeah.
guys are going to get back together or anything like that. But has it caused issues, or has it been fairly easy?
No, it's so I have dated. I haven't dated anyone that I've introduced to him, although I very much would have. There was one person that I dated for a little while that, yeah, I was kind of thinking that potentially, I might introduce to him, but things didn't progress. So that was fine. But there was no weirdness about introducing him. And there was also no weirdness within that relationship of, my relationship with their dad. It's not like we're, seeing having family dinner every week and stuff like that. But for me, and I can speak only for myself here, but if I'm going to be dating someone, they are going to have to be okay with the relationship
Yeah.
that I have with him. And if they're not, then that's going to interrupt my family unit, as you say. And I'm not down with that. And so it's just part of my priority in that no one is actually going to come in between that family, first and foremost, because if it comes in between me and him, it's going to come between me and my girls. And
Exactly.
that's not on. And so when I date people, like, that's just, when I find my next partner, which I will, I do want that. I do want to have someone in my life that I'm building a life with. They're going to be just as cool with it as what I am. And so he is dating someone at the minute. And I spoke to him about doing this interview before I come on, because that part of his story isn't mine to share without his
Yeah.
permission. But he said, he's happy for me to mention that, and that there is someone there, and I haven't met her yet, but she has met the girls. But I am going to meet her, because if she's going to be spending time with my children, then I would like to know who that is. And also for our girls to show that this can be okay,
Yeah.
and I'm still always going to be there as your mum. I am your mum. She might just be someone else special in your life and your daddy's life. But at the end of the day, like, I will always be your mum, and I'm okay for you to have a relationship with her. Not that they necessarily are asking for permission, but I think they always look to those caregivers and that safety for, like, is this okay?
Yeah.
And it's a big concept for a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old to understand, in that, like, there's another person there with daddy who's not mummy, but kind of special. But, like, it's just a big concept. And so we want to try and make that process as smooth as possible for them, knowing that this is going to be a new stage that we all have to navigate together. And, the only way that it's going to really work is if we have open communication about it. So if Quinn says some things to me about, what she's been feeling or thinking, then I will share that with him so he knows as well. So
Yeah.
he knows what things to look out for or what conversations to have with her to try and support that. And again, like the 3-year-old, she seems a bit young and doesn't really have, like, she's never really spoken about it. Excuse me. But the 5-year-old, she has a lot more awareness about what's going on. And so we're all just trying to figure it out together.
Hey, look, there's no manual for this, is there,
There
really?
is
It's all
not.
good. And it's emotion and people and thinking and like, no, look, I agree with you. I have my son, as everyone knows who listens to this regularly, and he's got two half sisters, and I am probably better friends with their mum than our ex-partner.
Mm.
But like, yeah, I go and stay with their mum. We go and see the girls. They see, they see their brother and stuff like that. And we all stay together in the same house. It's not as though we go and I stay somewhere and like, we are one big family unit. So because it's about the kids at the end of the day and, accepting other people for who they are. So
Yeah.
it's crazy. So look,
Yeah.
where do people get in contact with you if they want to learn more about, I'm going to pronounce this wrong.
Matrescence?
Matrescence.
Yes.
Matrescence.
Matrescence.
Yeah, and like if they're going through something similar and they just want to ask a question or like, I don't know what they want to
Yeah.
ask, but if they want to get in contact.
So if they want to come and chat to me, Instagram is probably the best place. Kirryn_Lee is my handle. I'm sure you'll link it. If you want to hear more about my story, I chat a little bit more about this I've got my own podcast. It's called Matrescence Awakening with Kirryn Lee. So the very first episode that I released on that on my podcast was all about my story with matrescence and the separation. So I'll chat more about it there. But there's lots of episodes there on, like tools that people might be able to use that are going through separation or even just that transition into motherhood as well. It's all about that motherhood transition. So there's a lot of good stuff on there. But yeah, I'm just so welcome anyone to come and reach out to me on Instagram. I love chatting to people in the DMs. I'm an open book. So if there's more questions, come and have a chat to me in the DMs.
Brilliant. No, thank you for that. And thank you for coming and joining us and telling us about, like, you'd separated from the girl's dad, but it's like a great story. It's a great positive story. And you've both come out of it fairly sane, let's say.
Yeah. And yeah, thank you for flagging that because I don't know if I've lost you.
No, I can still hear you, but I've lost the video, but that's okay. We're not showing video.
Have you got me?
Yeah. I have still got, hello.
Oh yeah, you got me. Okay.
Yeah, I still could hear you.
Oh, okay. You're frozen, so I didn't know if you were there. Yeah, thank you for flagging that because when I was going through the separation, especially in those early stages, I couldn't find any evidence of coming out of this, how we have come out of it. And everyone would project onto us, like even the lady at Centrelink when I was trying to go get some finances sorted, just you wait until you have to separate your finances, or just you wait until you have to, one of you gets a new partner, like it'll turn nasty. It always turns nasty. And like literally everyone was just trying to project this onto me. And I was like, I don't think it can, but I don't have the evidence. And so that's why I really love talking about this and sharing about it, that it can, like, number one, that you don't have to stay in a marriage just because it's okay and it should be enough. If it's not enough, it's not enough. And number two, like, it can be amicable. And I'd also just like to mention that I am really grateful for the girl's dad because he is so okay with me sharing this story. And I'm really conscious that I do try to share the parts that are just mine to share. And I will always check with him. Like I spoke to him about coming on and sharing on here. And, the parts that I haven't spoken about publicly, like him being in a relationship, I was like, are you happy for me to share with that? Do you not want me to? And so I really respect him and knowing that because he's so happy for me to share parts of my life and the little parts that involve him, and that's part of the story, if he says, no, I'm not comfortable to share with you sharing that, I'm really going to respect that. I'm not just going to go out
Yeah.
and break that because, at all points, number one, it's protecting that relationship for our children. And also because I just really value him as his own person as well. But yeah, just it takes two people to show up with that level of respect, to have that amicability through the process. And I'm really, really grateful for him in showing up in the way that he has as well.
Yes, no. He is still awesome, everyone. He's an awesome guy before and an awesome guy afterwards. Final question for you, right?
Yeah.
I know I said the other one was a final one, but this is the final one. What piece of advice have you been given that you still use today?
Yes, you sent this question through and I really had to think about it because the thing that kept coming to mind is that it's not a piece of advice that I got given, but it was that moment of the word trust being yelled in my head that felt like it was from someone else. And so every time I get to moments where I'm like, what am I doing? What is going on? Like, I feel like shit, I'm in the spiral. I just keep coming back to that trust. I have to trust the process. And the other thing at the moment that I've been really tapping into that hasn't necessarily come with me through the whole journey, but it's quite prominent for me at the moment, is something that a beautiful coach that I've worked with previously talks about, and that's being surprised and delighted by life, being open to being surprised and delighted. And so I'm really tapping into that more so right now to be like, what else is life going to bring me? How can I be surprised by life right now? And how can I be delighted by life right now? And I think that's just a really, really fun way that I'm just, bringing in more openness and curiosity as this single life continues to unfold.
I know. Single lifedom. It's
Yeah.
amazing. I'm just trying to stay in the now. That's what I'm trying to do, trying to stay in the present, not look back, not judge things by past experiences or anything like that. Stay in what's happening today, now, here, now, present, and not even plan for the future because you just don't know how long or what is in the future. And I have to agree with you. Trust your gut. If it feels right, then it 9 times out of 10 is right.
It is. And it's sometimes very much easier said than done than trusting that gut.
Look at it.
Feeling that muscle.
I agree. Look, when I first came to Australia 17 odd years ago, it felt right. I felt like this was the place that felt right. I didn't know why, like you. Didn't know why, didn't understand why, just felt I had to come and live in Australia. And I've been here 16 years. It's been a roller coaster, let me put it this way, right? It hasn't been all a bed of roses and everything. I've moved here and everything's been great. But it still feels right. It still feels like I should be here for whatever reason. So who knows what journey I'm going to be on over here in the land of Oz. Halfway around the world from the land of UK, but I lived half my life in the UK. So who knows?
Yeah.
So look, thank you. Thank you so much, Kirryn, for joining us today. I'm going to let you get on with your day over there in WA, in Perth, in WA. And it's been a real pleasure having you on.
Thanks so much for having me and allowing me to share my story.
Thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed this podcast and you would like to hear more, please hit subscribe wherever you like to hear podcasts. If you would like to support us further, share this episode with your friends and family. And finally, drop us a review on iTunes, as I'd love to hear your thoughts, comments, and ideas. It all helps me to understand and produce awesome content you want to hear just like this. If you want to check out our past episodes, write to us, appear on the podcast, or for links, resources, and show notes, go to our website, www.strongsingleandhuman.com. We are also on all the usual social media platforms, Insta, Facey and Twitter. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I hope to see you back here again soon. Be kind to yourself, and remember, no one is perfect. We're all just putting one foot in front of the other and doing our best. I'm Claire Martin, and you've been listening to the Strong, Single and Human podcast.